Gaza, the United Nations has said, has become a hellhole. Israeli bombs have decimated whole neighbourhoods. In 6 days alone, 6,000 bombs were dropped on the besieged enclave. That's more bombs than NATO forces dropped in an entire year of intense fighting in Afghanistan. An Israeli military spokesperson was frank about the purpose. The emphasis, they said, and I quote, was on damage, not accuracy. Nearly 6,000 Palestinians have been killed, including nearly 2,500 children. Last night was the deadliest so far. 700 people dead. Madam Deputy Speaker, this is happening to one of the most densely populated areas on Earth, where 2.3 million people, half of whom are children, are trapped in an area no bigger than the Isle of Wight. And even before the recent violence, Gaza had been besieged for more than a decade and a half, with access to land, air and water blockaded. Back in 2010, even Conservative Prime Minister David Cameron called it a prison camp. But now Israel has imposed a total siege, cutting off water, fuel, electricity and food. The UN says hospitals will run out of fuel today, and incubators with premature babies will stop working. Israel's evacuation order, demanding 1.1 million people flee their homes, was described as impossible without devastating humanitarian consequences by the United Nations. The World Health Organization called it a death sentence for the sick and injured. Indiscriminate bombing, collective punishment, forcibly displacing people. These are clear violations of international law, not according to me, but the United Nations General Secretary. Madam Deputy Speaker, this is in no way downplaying or denying Hamas's appalling attacks on Israeli citizens, which I absolutely condemn and again echo the call for the release of hostages. Just as I and no member here can imagine the fear and anguish of families who have seen loved ones taken hostage, nor can I imagine the terror of Palestinian families facing constant Israeli bombardment. Yet on this question, the United Nations General Secretary again said yesterday, international law is clear. Yet in this House, people don't want to accept that. Hamas's crimes in no way excuse what we have seen since. But Madam Deputy Speaker, this is relevant to this debate because these clear violations of international law have been given the green light by political leaders here in the UK and beyond, even with an Israeli defence official promising to turn Gaza into a city of tents. And the Prime Minister has still refused to acknowledge these clear violations of international law. Unlike a growing number of counterparts across the world, he is still refusing to call for an immediate ceasefire. Madam Deputy Speaker, that is utterly shameful.